Let me tell you the story of a man whose love for his daughters is so deep that it slowly destroys his life. Father Goriot is one of the most powerful novels written by Honoré de Balzac, published in 1835. The novel is set in Paris during the early 19th century and reveals the harsh realities of society, ambition, and family loyalty. At its heart, it is the tragic story of a father who sacrifices everything for his children, and a young man who must decide what kind of person he will become in a world ruled by money and status. The story begins in a shabby boarding house in Paris known as the Maison Vauquer. It is located in a poor neighborhood and run by Madame Vauquer, a widow who rents rooms to people of modest means. The house is gloomy, worn down, and filled with the smell of cheap food and damp furniture. It is a place where people live not because they want to, but because they cannot afford anything better. Among the residents is an elderly man named Jean-Joachim Goriot. At first glance, he appears quiet and somewhat strange. The other tenants notice that he lives very simply, despite having once been wealthy. When he first arrived at the boarding house several years earlier, he dressed well and paid for one of the best rooms. But over time, his lifestyle has declined. He has moved to smaller and cheaper rooms and sold many of his possessions. The other residents begin to suspect that he must have lost his fortune through foolishness or scandal. Because of his strange behavior, the tenants mock him behind his back and call him Father Goriot. They notice that he sometimes melts down silver plates or jewelry, which makes them believe he might be secretly hiding money. Yet no one truly understands the reason behind his sacrifices. Another important resident of the boarding house is Eugène de Rastignac, a young law student from a poor noble family in the countryside. Rastignac has come to Paris with dreams of success. He hopes to rise in society, gain wealth, and secure a powerful position. However, Paris quickly reveals itself to be a difficult and ruthless place. Without money or connections, success is nearly impossible. Rastignac's life begins to change when he visits his wealthy cousin, Madame de Balzac, who belongs to high Parisian society. Through her, he gains a glimpse into the glamorous world of aristocratic salons, elegant parties, and powerful families. But he also begins to understand that this world is governed by ambition, manipulation, and competition. Madame de Balzac warns Rastignac that Paris is a battlefield where people must fight for power. If he wants to succeed, he must be prepared to use strategy and sometimes even moral compromise. During his visits to high society, Rastignac meets a beautiful and charming woman named Delphine de Nucingen. He soon learns something shocking. Delphine is one of Father Goriot's daughters. Goriot also has another daughter named Anastasie de Restaud. Both women are married into wealthy aristocratic families. At first, Rastignac cannot understand why Father Goriot lives in poverty while his daughters enjoy luxurious lives. Gradually, the truth becomes clear. Many years earlier, Goriot was a successful pasta manufacturer who earned a large fortune during the French Revolution. He adored his two daughters and devoted his entire life to making them happy. He spent enormous amounts of money providing them with luxurious educations, elegant clothes, and prestigious marriages. But after their marriages, everything changed. Both daughters became obsessed with maintaining their status in high society. Their husbands controlled their finances and cared more about social reputation than family affection. When the daughters needed money for debts, parties, or romantic affairs, they secretly turned to their father for help. Goriot could never refuse them. Little by little, he gave them everything he owned. He sold his business, his property, and even his personal belongings. Every sacrifice was made in the hope that his daughters would love him and remain close to him. Yet, instead of appreciating his devotion, they began to feel embarrassed by him. His modest appearance and simple manners no longer fit the world they lived in. Eventually, they stopped visiting him regularly. They only came when they needed money. When Rastignac discovers this truth, he feels both sympathy and shock. He cannot imagine loving someone who treats him so cruelly. Yet Goriot never complains about his daughters. Instead, he constantly defends them and blames society for their behavior. His love for them is unconditional, almost blind. As Rastignac spends more time with Delphine, he becomes emotionally involved with her. Their relationship also becomes a way for him to enter Parisian high society. Delphine encourages him because she hopes he will help her gain independence from her controlling husband. Meanwhile, another mysterious resident of the boarding house plays an important role in the story. This man is Vautrin, a charismatic and dangerous figure who seems to know far more about the world than he should. Vautrin observes Rastignac carefully and offers him a shocking proposal. He explains that success in society often depends not on talent or honesty, but on opportunity and boldness. Vautrin suggests that Rastignac could quickly become wealthy by marrying a young woman named Victorine. Another resident of the boarding house, however, Victorine's brother currently controls the family fortune. Vautrin proposes arranging the brother's death so that Victorine will inherit the wealth. This offer horrifies Rastignac. Although he dreams of success, he is not ready to commit such a terrible crime. He refuses Vautrin's plan, realizing that achieving wealth through violence would destroy his conscience. Eventually, the police discover that Vautrin is actually a notorious escaped criminal. He is arrested and taken away, leaving the boarding house residents shocked and frightened. While these events unfold, Father Goriot's health begins to decline. Years of emotional suffering and financial sacrifice have exhausted him. Yet, even as he grows weaker, he continues worrying about his daughter's happiness. One day, Anastasie arrives in desperation because she needs money to pay her gambling debts and save her lover from ruin. Goriot gives her the last valuables he possesses. Shortly afterward, Delphine also demands financial help. By this point, Goriot has almost nothing left. His small room in the boarding house is nearly empty. The furniture has been sold, and his clothing is worn and thin. Yet, he never regrets helping his daughters. To him, their happiness is more important than his own survival. Eventually, Goriot becomes seriously ill. Rastignac stays by his side and tries to comfort him. During these final days, Goriot speaks constantly about his daughters, hoping they will come to see him. Rastignac sends messages asking them to visit their dying father, but they do not come. Both daughters are busy with social obligations and personal affairs. They send excuses instead of appearing in person. Goriot, still hoping, continues asking whether they have arrived. As his condition worsens, he finally begins to realize the painful truth. The daughters he loved more than anything in the world have abandoned him. In a heartbreaking moment of clarity, Goriot understands that his excessive devotion may have helped create their selfishness. By giving them everything without limits, he allowed them to believe that his love required no gratitude. He dies almost alone, with only Rastignac and a medical student named Bianchon present. After his death, Rastignac tries to organize a proper funeral. However, the daughters refuse to pay for it. They send empty carriages as a symbolic gesture, but do not attend themselves. The funeral is small and quiet. Only a few people stand by the grave as Father Goriot is buried. As Rastignac watches the burial, he feels a mixture of sorrow, anger, and determination. He realizes that Parisian society can be cruel and heartless, especially toward those who lack power or wealth. Standing on a hill overlooking the city, Rastignac looks at Paris and makes a silent challenge. He declares that he will fight against this society and succeed within it, no matter how difficult the struggle becomes. The novel ends with this powerful moment of ambition and defiance. Through the story of Father Goriot and Rastignac, Balzac reveals the brutal realities of social ambition. Paris appears glamorous on the surface, but beneath that elegance lies a system driven by money, status, and selfish ambition. Father Goriot represents pure parental love taken to an extreme. His willingness to sacrifice everything for his daughters ultimately leads to his destruction. His tragedy raises an important question. Can love remain healthy when it demands nothing in return? Rastignac represents the younger generation entering this complicated world. Unlike Goriot, he understands that survival in society requires strategy and strength. Father Goriot is not just the story of one man's suffering. It is also a broader portrait of society itself. Balzac shows how wealth and status can distort relationships, turning love into obligation and family into opportunity. By the end of the novel, the boarding house remains unchanged. New tenants will arrive, and life will continue. But the tragedy of Father Goriot leaves a lasting impression. It reminds us that in a world obsessed with ambition and status, the most genuine emotions, love, loyalty, and sacrifice, are often the most vulnerable.